Someone says where in the Discord is this document? Should be in meeting resources. So that channel has the Zoom and it has the instruction document as well. All right, so before the workshop, we updated the executive board applications from last week. We have a couple new roles. As you might know, the workshop lead and training lead roles that we had in the past, they required a bit of experience. These three new roles should be like zero experience required. Just like if you want to get involved with the club, if you want to get involved with student organizations in general, I highly recommend scanning this one. The middle one is our dev team applications. After this meeting today, you should have a bit more knowledge about React Native and Node, which is most of our stack that we use for Codefinity. So you might be able to just test out of the beginner training program and then just go straight onto the dev team if you're interested in that. Last thing right there is our Google Calendar where we have all of our events, so you don't have to manually add everything. If you haven't had a chance to scan those, we'll be posting them on the Discord. But yeah, I'll let Karthik take over from here. He's going to present about what React Native is, and then we'll go into a demo after that.
All right, so this is going to be like a high-level overview of the mobile development ecosystem. And basically, we're going to be going over React Native, which is basically the framework used to develop a lot of mobile applications. And so what is it? So building software, it's basically building out software specifically for mobile devices, right? You have web applications. A lot of you might be familiar with React, which we use for computers. And so, right, we have like the launch of the Apple iPhone, the App Store, and the Android and Android Market. And then so with that, we have what's called React Native that can be used to develop a lot of these mobile applications. And so we have had 257 billion downloads on app stores for mobile applications in 2023 itself. So the market itself is really huge, and this is like quite a valuable skills. And there's around 4.83 million apps available across the Google and App Store today. And there's around 935 billion in estimated revenue in 2024. So again, the market space for this is huge. And so what is a good mobile development, right? We want to focus on a simple UI with clarity and minimalism. I want you to think of kind of like the apps that you use day to day, right? Your Instagram, your iMessages, focus on the UI that you use there, right? You want to have a logical placement of elements. You want to have something that is clean and I guess very like easy to focus on in terms of clarity. You want to have seamless navigation. You don't want to be finding like you want to spend 10 minutes looking for the next button. You want to have a clear sense of navigation for what to do next and know your functionality. Make sure everything's functional in the sense that whatever button, whatever entry box, or whatever feature you have has its intended function. And then so looking at the current landscape, you have Android, which is 72% of the current global market. You have iOS, which is 28% of the global market. So I guess like there's a pretty big difference between Android and Apple. And for Android, the technology is used as Kotlin and Java. A lot of you might be familiar with Java. But for Apple, they use Swift and Objective-C, which is, I guess, a little bit less, I guess, prevalent in, I guess, like our classes or day-to-day usage. And then so you have different types of apps. You have native or hybrid apps. Native is built with a software development kit, and you have hybrid, which runs in WebView. Benefits of native is that you have better performance and you can access device-specific features. But the downside with that is you're going to have two separate code bases. For a hybrid, you're going to have a cross-platform, but there's going to be no device features and there's going to be lesser quality in terms of performance. So what is React Native and what's so good about it that we're here to like, I guess, like learn about React Native? And so React Native is basically a library to build Android, iOS native-ish apps using React. It was created in Facebook and it was created by Facebook not created by Facebook, it was created at Facebook in 2013. And its whole function was to render UIs better on mobile devices. And you have a native-like feel, hence the name React Native. And you basically use JavaScript similar to our traditional React that we use for web applications, and you can have a cross-platform and fast refresh. Some alternatives. I haven't personally used these. Sora might be a better like person to speak about like on these topics, but we have Flutter, Ionic, and Bank Transactions. I've heard of Flutter. It was created by Google and it has a cross-platform using Dart, and it's quite popular. But and then we have Ionic and Bank Transactions, which are, I guess,
Xamarin. The one on the right should be Xamarin. That's just a little typo on our side.
yeah. So those are like I guess mildly popular. I haven't heard of them personally, but I guess they're there. And then the advantages of React is that you have a lot of community support, right? Whenever you build applications, you want to make sure that the documentations and the community base is really big and useful, right? Because you're not going to know everything off the get-go. And even if you have a lot of experience working with it, you're still going to be looking up things, right? So a big community base is really important. And you want to have a really good, like, I guess, like way of just being able to, like, if you have a problem, just look that up and find it quickly and not have as many obstacles in your development. And then another advantage with React Native is that it's very similar to React. So in a way, like if you know React, it's not much of a gap to cover to get to React Native, right? And so like it's kind of like a two birds with one stone type of thing. And so in terms of performance, there's generally a faster and a better user experience with React Native. So, Sorb, do you want to speak about this?
Sure. So React Native, what native means is that it runs natively on iOS and Android apps. So the alternative would just be to develop for Android and then iOS separately. However, that gets confusing a lot of times. You don't want to have two workflows. So what React Native does is it converts some basic React components, similar to our React workshop that we had last week. So components that are familiar to any web developers, right? And then it converts those to their respective Android and then iOS versions. So you can see in the image here, in React Native, there's a component called Vue. In Android, that converts to a thing called Vue Group, whereas in iOS, when you build it, it'll convert to a thing called UI View. And there's a couple other components like that. So the thing about React Native that makes it special is that it allows you to build in one workflow and then export to both iOS and Android to make the development process a lot more simple.
And then so for this is like the workflow. You have like development and testing, and then you have your app deployment frameworks. So who uses React Native? A lot of I guess like services use React Native. You have Amazon, Walmart, Discord, Shopify, PlayStation, Facebook, Pinterest, Outlook, Tesla. I think what's that last one? The eighth one?
Coinbase.
Coinbase. And so, I mean, it's really popular. Again, we already went over the fact that the market is immense for mobile applications. And like a lot of people, even in classes, don't focus on mobile applications or even in their personal projects. So like the whole space for this is really big. I know for one of my internships, I think it was like 2 years ago, I was working on an e-store, right? And we had to design a website for our platform. And there was a lot of work with Shopify. And so a lot of the stuff was with React Native, and I didn't have much experience with that. So I would say if I had more experience with React Native, I feel like I could have been like a better intern in that regard, and my skills could have been like better utilized, and I could have gotten like more things like accomplished in that sense. So I think it's a really cool and useful skill to kind of work with. So when to use React Native versus native? You want to use React Native when you want to focus on development speed. You want to use the language you know, JavaScript, and it's more easily to maintain consistency across your UIs with the React Natives. Native provides better app performance and access to a full range of device features, and there is traditionally a better UX experience. So we have these core components. We have button, image, alert, modal, flat list, view, text, section list, text input, action sheet, kind of like the components you see with React. But I mean, it seems like there's like a couple like specific ones like Toast Android. And so basically you have the whole React component subset. and now you have React Native components specifically. And here's an example where you import style sheet, text view, and button, and you export this app to have a button that says press me. It's very similar to like React if you worked with React in the sense that you defer your application, export your application, and there's like a return rendering the application with a button or whatever. And so here I think this is the styling for that. I think they use HTML, CSS. Yeah, so for dot text, you create a class text and you specify different margins, font size. You can have that to tailor your visual aspect of your application. And then here, I believe they create an input, I think, right?
Yeah, so there's a text component on the top that just says your favorite thing about React Native. Underneath that is a text input. So instead of an input command like you'd find in React Basic, it's called text input. And then it'll import some properties as well. So slightly different from React, but same overall structure.
And then here you have you create your function handle button click, right? And so basically here it says, once you click that button, it'll send out an alert and it'll say the SEC logo was pressed, right? And so when you return the rendering, you can do an on press, right? I think it's on click in React. I might be wrong, but it's slightly different here. Now it's on press, same structure and same logic though. You create that, you embed that function into that. And basically when you click that image, right, you're going to have a message that pops up that says SEC logo was pressed. And so this is more of an overview of the Expo ecosystem. It's an open source framework to build, deploy, and manage React Native applications, created in 2014 to streamline the process of building cross-platform native-ish Reacts. And so the characteristics of this is that you have an ease of setup, a managed workflow with built-in libraries and APIs, and a large community of developers. And Saurabh, can you go over this as well?
So what Expo is just the way to test your React Native app. So in React, like we did last week, we kind of just tested it in the browser. Obviously, since we're working with mobile development now, Expo is a mobile app. And then there's also emulators you can run on your computer as well. But you should have downloaded the Expo Go app, and that allows you to essentially test out your React Native application in real time. So anytime you hit save, you'll be able to render all your changes in real time. So like I mentioned, there's also an emulator for the Expo SDK. So that's what I'll be using just for demonstration purposes. You'll get to see a bit more about how that works later on.
And you go over this.
Yeah, so the way build deployment works with Expo is a bit complex. We don't need to get like too much in detail over this, but essentially you have React Native code that runs using EAS build, and then it creates the app binaries, and then as you can see, EAS submit exports it to iOS as well as Android. So two different versions of the same app that run essentially the same code. So if there's a native dependency, there's a bit of a slightly different process. I believe that's changed now, but it'll be Expo pre-build that'll compile all your dependencies into one, Expo build, and then again, EAS submit will split it into the App Store and Play Store versions. So the advantage of this is that rather than having a very complex workflow for different platforms like iOS and Android, you run everything through Expo. So you code in React Native one version, and then Expo compiles that and builds it to the iOS version and then the Play Store version. And now we'll get started with the demo. Let me share my screen. So thank you, Karthik, for that. So if you haven't already, the instruction document should be in the Discord and meeting resources. Let me share my screen. All right. So like I said, the everything is in the meeting resources channel in the instruction document. You guys can't see that. Cool. Yeah, so in the instruction document over here, we have essentially we're gonna be just redoing a workshop that we did last year. That was run by Xander from the Clubfinity team. He's now working at Walmart. We might get to say hi to him sometime later this semester. Everything's sharing. Yeah. Cool. So you guys should have been able to clone the incomplete version. So it should look something like this, git clone, and then we're just gonna open that up into in VS Code. So my thing is gonna look slightly different just because I have a couple versions of this repository, but for you it should say code SEC mobile dev workshop guided. And that's just gonna open this up into VS Code. But in this terminal, we're just gonna run npm install. And that's just gonna install all the npm packages. So we covered this last week, but package.json just stores every dependency in our project. And obviously we can't upload everything to GitHub. So npm install is what we run after we clone that. So I have a version of the completed repository here that I'm just gonna show you guys really quick what the app will look like at the end. And again, let me know if you guys want me to slow it down or anything. There's not too many people here, so I shouldn't slow it down that much. All right, so don't worry about any of this right now. I'm just showing you what the completed repository is going to look like by the end. All right, so this is what we're going to be building today. It's a little to-do app, and then as well, there's a notes app. So we can complete tasks, delete tasks, make new tasks, and everything. But yeah, I'm just gonna close it out for now, and then we'll work through it as it goes. All right, so this is the repository that we just cloned. This is where all of you should be right now. So you run npm install, and then next thing is npx expo start. Let me zoom in a bit. Can you guys see that fine? The font and everything, font size. So yeah, okay, cool. npx expo start should run the server. I believe npm start does the same exact thing. All right, so in your terminal, you guys should see a QR code. Obviously scan your own, not mine, but on your laptop, scan the QR code with your phone, and then that should open up the current app in your Expo Go app. What I'm gonna do is the other option, which is to run the emulator on Android. I believe Windows has the Android option, and then Macs have the iOS option. I'm not gonna go through those steps right now because to set that up takes a really long time. Yeah, but usually I run the Expo Go app on my phone just because it makes development easier. For now, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to run it on my emulator right here.
Do you need to rescan it?
No, so once you scan it, everything is going to be updated automatically. And then the Expo app on your phone has a couple options like refreshing the app and everything like that. Let me close this out. And it does take a minute to bundle. That's something unlike React. React is pretty quick. React Native has a lot more to package. But right now what it's essentially doing is packaging it and then exporting it to the Android version. From this point on though, everything should be pretty immediate for development purposes at least. Now, if you have the guide pulled up, you'll notice that this workshop's going to be a bit different from last one. We're not going to be coding everything one by one. We're just going to be copy pasting from the guide essentially. The reason for that is that apps like this size get annoying to type out, and I wouldn't be able to fit that in a 1 hour long workshop like this. But I will go through and read all the code. So I suggest you do the same, just copy paste the code and then read through it with me. Cool. So I believe this should be our app right here on the right side of the screen. And obviously, you guys should have it on your phone. Do you guys see the app on your phone? Just white screen right now, nothing special. Close that up. Cool. So now I'm just going to minimize the terminal. So step one is navigation. So you'll notice on many apps that you use that there's a navigation on the bottom where you can click through different tabs. So that's in screens, sorry, utils, app navigator. We're just going to replace this line with thing from the guide. So the guide has some errors. You might need to fix some new lines here and there. And then over here, let's do that. What we're doing right now is creating a tab navigator component that's just importing from a library. And then we're having two different screens right now. There's a to-do screen and then a notes screen. So as you guys can see, there's a bit of styling. So just the header is going to be 100, and then we set the color. And then the tabs are just going to be the to-do screen and then the note screen, as we saw in the demo. And we'll fill those in a bit later, but you'll get to see how that works. Cool. And then obviously that's not going to show up unless we put it into app.js. So like we saw last week, all the code runs from app.js. So right here, we're going to put the component that we just created. So we imported App Navigator up here from the folder or from the file that we just worked in, and then we're just going to import it into the main app.js. So right here, you can see there's a to-do screen and then there's a notes screen. So if we go back here, if we change the title to something like Hello World, you get to see how quickly it updates. So it's pretty much real time. And that's the neat thing about Expo and Expo Go. So now it's stack navigation. So you're familiar with tab navigation is what we just created. Stack navigation is something different. So take the Canvas app, for example. If you start off from the Canvas home, you might go into the calendar and then you might click a specific assignment and then view the details. Now, if you hit the back button here, you'd expect to go back to the calendar. Now, if you did a different path, went from Canvas home to course details, to assignments, and then to assignment details, then you'd expect the back button to take you to the assignments tab again. And that's essentially what stack navigation is. It's the logic behind the back button on your phone or on any app. And we'll see a bit more about how that works in the app coming up. So let's create the component right here. So back in appnavigator.js, we're just going to replace step 1, part 3 with the stack navigator, and then we'll put that into the app navigator function. All right, so this notes stack screen function, we're going to hit enter twice into the return. We need to fix some comment issues. Right. And make sure you don't copy that comment. There's a couple of issues with that. So just, it should look something like this, where you're returning some empty component and then the code copy pasted from the document. And now final step is to put that into the app navigator component. So we copy this, and then let's replace the notes component with this. So now you guys can see if we go to the notes tab, hit new note, then the back button will take us back to the notes screen, and so on. Are you guys still with me right now? Because that's the navigation done. I know we went a bit fast, but let me know when to slow down. Good. Cool. So now we're gonna fill in the screens a bit. So we're gonna start with the to-do screen. So inside of the main function in todos.js, that's gonna be right here, line 45. Let's get an issue with the comments here. So you'll see the basic structure of a to-do. So if you were at our last workshop, you might remember that the messages object had a message text, a created at, a profile picture, profile name, some other values. A to-do in this case is going to have a title, going to have some data, and then going to have whether it's completed or not. So now we have to create something to display the to-dos. So now over here, we're just going to replace this with that code. And then we'll see, it's not pretty, but this is essentially what we have here, where we see our active to-dos, which are to buy groceries and to do laundry. And that's up here. The values for that are the ID, task, and then completed, false, or true. Cool. Next step is a to-do item inside of the view. So I believe that should be right here. All right, sorry, this should be in the to-do items.js. Cool. So the code for that is in to components slash to do item.js. So we just copy paste that there.
Is it?
That's going to be in the components folder in the to do item.js file.
It's
Is this zoom level fine, or do you want me to zoom in anymore? I can zoom in. That helps you see. You got a chance to find it, or so
and then inside the row brackets.
it should look like this. So
Then where was step two was in there too?
so where it says step 2 part 3, you're just gonna paste that code. And then fix these comments. Then we can go on to the next step. Next thing we should do is to actually render that checkbox. So back into todos.js inside of the section list component. So that's over here. It should be line 60 is where you paste the next part. So now, if you're caught up to where I am, the to-do should look something like this, where there's a checkbox on the left side and then a bit of styling on the right side. Are you guys caught up to where I am right now? Let me know if you need me to stop. Otherwise, I'll just like keep going. Cool. And then now we need to set something to actually handle that check and delete function. So in todos.js, we're gonna look for the handle check function. So that's over here, line 36. So the handle check function should look through all the to-dos and then set the current to-do to completed true. So this syntax looks kind of funky. Again, JavaScript's kind of different from other languages. So what we see here is this is called the spread operator. And what this does is it passes in the entire array of to-dos as separate items into this function. And then it adds another component that says completed, and then it changes the value of the completed to the opposite of what it currently is. And again, you're probably not going to understand that logic on the first try, but I'll talk to you afterwards if you need a bit more help understanding this line. So yeah, that logic should handle the check function. So we see that when we click a checkbox, it toggles the value of the completed property. Next thing is to handle the deletion of it. So in the handle deletion function, let's just paste this code. So now we're gonna say that we're gonna filter out any to-do that is the current to-do. So if we delete this one, it's gone forever. And now we're gonna finish the add to-do functionality. So this little plus button in the bottom right corner, what that does is calls the handle add to-do function. So when we click that button, we want to create a new to-do. And that new to-do is going to have these properties with an ID. The task is input. And then we're going to set the completed by default to false. So let's just say testing and then add to do. So see that created a valid to do. And now if the list of to-dos is empty, so say we delete both of these, we want to render something special so the user doesn't just see a blank screen. So empty list. This is going to be on line 62. We're just going to create this new function called empty list. And then inside of the section list component over here, you should be here. Cool. So I just went pretty fast right there. Are you guys where I am somewhat? Let me know when you get caught up. Otherwise everything's in the instruction document if you want to follow along there. Yeah, so right now we just handled the add to do functionality. So if we were to create a new to do, it adds that to the list. If we want to mark it as complete or incomplete, we can do that. And then if we want to delete it, that functionality is also handled. And then what we just did right now is to render an error message if the to-dos list is empty. So it says press the plus button to get started. Let's just add something for now, just so that it's not empty. Cool. Now we want to create a function to store that to-dos data on the device storage. So not just like in our React Native session, we want to store it on the device. Cool. So there's a storage.js function in the utils folder. So let's copy paste this code here and then fix that comment. And then the next function should be copied from here. And then fix that comment as well. Cool. So this stores.js file that we just created, essentially you can go through the code yourself, but I'm not going to go through it right now. But it's just calling the async storage function from the async storage library, and that's just storing all the to-do values in on the device storage. Cool. And now we want to actually load that value from storage. So back into to-dos.js. Let's go ahead and replace line 26 with this. So when the screen is mounted, we're just going to load from the local storage the to-dos list, like we just handled that functionality. And then we're going to set the to-dos value to that. And then the next step is to make sure any changes are saved to the device storage. So over here, if the to-dos list has a value, we're going to save to storage. And then both of those functionalities are handled in this storage.js file that we just created. Cool. And now let's just start off the to-dos list as null. So over here, we initialized it as buy groceries and then do laundry. That's just for testing purposes, but for now, we're just going to say use state null. Or I believe this should be empty brackets. I think there's some new error. Okay, so that's the to-dos functionality right now. And we're close to end time. I'll finish going over the rest, but for now, I just want to show that we have a complete to-dos page working. And then next thing we're going to do is a notes page. But for now, we've seen the create operation, read operation, update, and then delete. That's like the CRUD thing we talked about last week. And then you should be able to complete and uncomplete different tasks. So that's all the functionality we just handled. And obviously, we didn't really write it from scratch. We copy pasted it. But if you want to read through it and then ask me any questions afterwards or just DM me about how the code works specifically, I'd be happy to answer that. Yeah, next thing is the notes page. So this calls a flat list component. So in the notes.js file, step 3, part 1. We see a list of notes. And flat list is a component that's specific to React Native. I don't believe it's in React, but that's just going to list out the current notes that we have. So like we can see, it's initialized the grocery list and then meeting notes. So inside of note item, so similar how we did to do item. For sure. Yeah. Thanks so much. And again, if you have to leave, we're gonna all the notes are here, and then we're gonna post the recording on YouTube. So back in the note item.js function, we're gonna set should be right here. So hit enter, paste that. Paste that. And now back into the notes.js function. 3 part 2, we're gonna actually render each note. So sorry, that should be this line 48. So what you can see we just did is we created a note item component, and that component is stored within the components folder. And that actually renders the note as it should be, with the heading that displays the note title. Then there's text that displays the note content, and then there's text that displays the note date right here. And then what we did is just import that note item component into here and display each item as a note item. Now we want to be able to edit the notes. So inside of note editor.js, we're going to copy this code. So note editor.js should be here. Step 3, part. Cool. So this functionality that we just added, essentially what it does is just make sure that there's functionality handled for the keyboard. So right now you can see I'm not going to go through all this code, but something important right here is this line right here. So it says if platform.os is iOS, then we're going to say padding, otherwise we're going to say height. And this is something specific to React Native, how most components, most functionality is handled within React Native natively, converting from just basic React Native into Android and then iOS versions. Some certain things like this, we have to manually check the platform to see if it's iOS and render a certain thing. If it's Android, render another thing. And that can be done using a ternary statement like this with the question mark and the colon statement. Everything else is basic React Native stuff. You don't have to worry about that too much. But yeah, you can see we have a text input area for the title and then a text input area for the content. And now back inside note editor.js. So right here, you need to replace line 16 through 19 with this code actually. Cool. So what this is saying is that by default, the title and the content is just going to be an empty string. And then we're going to have a functionality to handle saving the note changes with a done button. So inside of the handle save component or the function on line 28, we're just going to replace this functionality. So when we enter a new note, say grocery lists, onion, I don't know. When we're going to handle the done button, it's going to save a new note with the ID, the title, the content, and the last modified property. And then we actually need to call that function. So this next function that we just copied is going to be in the notes.js function. So in notes.js, it's saying use effect. And what use effect does is just run the function every time there's a change to any of the parameters. So in these brackets, at the end of the use effect function, we're going to see what parameters we're going to be watching out for. So whenever there's a change to the new note parameters, we're going to run this function. So the done button should create a new note, and it works here. We're going to do the same thing for note deletion, where we'll insert this code inside the handle deletion function on line 41. And then create a new function on the notes.js for step 3, part 6. That'll be on line 51. So now if we click into a certain note, this trash can button deletes the note. And then there's one last functionality that we need to do. So there's a little copy button in the top right corner of each note. We're gonna say handle the copy functionality. So back inside the note editor, copy to clipboard. We're gonna replace line 47 with this. So we're just gonna create a new note that has the same title and same content. Or sorry, this just copies it to the clipboard. And it copies the title, new line, and then the content. And then it sets the value to our clipboard. So each phone, whether you're an iOS or an Android, there's a clipboard where you can see the things you've last copied and then paste the things that you last copied. So that's what this function does. Let me pause there real quick. Is everyone like at least somewhat caught up with these functions or at least knows what I did? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Cool. And now we're gonna do the same thing we did with the to-dos function, where if the list is empty, we're gonna render a special message. So for example, let's delete this. Let's delete this note. So inside notes.js, where it says step 3 part 8 on line 61, let's paste this. And then we just created that, but we need to render it. So inside of the notes.js function, inside of flat list, we're going to create a new property. So flat list is another React Native component. And there's one property that says list empty component, which handles the functionality if the list is empty. And that just calls this function. And this function just renders text that says press the pencil button to get started. So now we have functionality handled for creating a new note, tests, hello world, that runs every time you click button, or sorry, done. We have functionality for deleting a new note every time you hit the trash can icon, and then copying a new note. So that's create, read, update, delete, done for us. And now, similar to how we just did with the to-dos function, we want to store this on our phone. So inside notes.js, over here, line 32 is where step 3 part 9 goes. Cool. So we just put in this code right here. So again, we're using that use effects hook that we saw earlier. So every time there's an update to the application, we're just going to load the notes variable from storage and then set the notes variable to that value. Same thing, every time there's a change to the notes variable, we're going to save the current value of notes to the notes variable in device storage. And now back up here where we initially set notes to grocery list and meeting notes. Let's just replace that with null, or I believe that should be an empty string. So now we see the notes value is being stored on local device storage. If we set some test note, say hello world, say 7:39 p.m. because that's the current time. Let's try to just close this out and then see what happens if we restart the server. So hopefully when we restart the server, we should see the notes that we saved and the to-dos that we saved stored on our device. and then loaded back into the app. So we're gonna restart the server, hit A to run the Android emulator. Cool. So we just reran the server, and now the things that we just saved, hello world, is saved properly. So as you can see, we were able to close out everything and then restart with the same server. And what it did was bring up the device storage. In this case, it's the emulator storage, but in your case, if you're running XPO on your phone, it'll be your personal phone storage. And it'll pull up the values that we set for the notes and to-dos variable, and then it'll render those. So I believe that's the end of the instruction document, but just a quick summary for what we did today. We did navigation first, so the user can navigate between to-dos, notes, that's called tab navigation, and then stack navigation is how the user is able to hit back, and then it takes them back to the current page they were on. For the to-dos page, we handled creating a new note, reading a new note, updating it, and then deleting it. After all that is done, we save it to device storage. And then the same exact thing with the notes section. So that's a little bare bones app. I've used React Native for a couple of my hackathons in the past. So we use that with Firebase, and then we created a little map app that shows the user reports submitted by other people as well. So I highly recommend you guys use this for some other personal projects, put this on your resume. But yeah, if you guys have any questions like last week, I'm just gonna go around and try to fix any of your errors afterwards. Otherwise, feel free to DM me afterwards. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Let me put the final slides back on the screen. So just last thing I want to go is just again, these three links are the last thing I want to end up on. So the exec board applications, we have a few current openings for let me see the titles. So we have openings for workshop lead, training lead, social lead, sponsorship lead, and marketing lead. If any of those sounds appealing to you, feel free to talk to us afterwards. Dev team applications, if this workshop was fun, I know it's like really hard to follow along in this time frame, but if you guys are curious about full stack development in more detail, sign that. And then our Google Calendar. I think next week is our bowling socials at the Rights. So we'll have like free bowling, free ping pong. I think there's pool. There's a Switch there, I believe. Some pretty fun stuff. So definitely stop by for that. Other than that, I want to thank you guys for coming. I know there are a lot of other conflicting events, but yeah, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.